here to talk about Brown at 55, Fulfilling the Promise, probably the most important Supreme Court decision of the 20th century, and it had important roots right here in Richmond and in Virginia, and it gives us a chance to think and to celebrate this remarkable outcome of this big change. And I love the statue we have in Capitol Square now, commemorating Barbara Johns and her allies and Oliver Hill, reminding us of the wonderful things that happened right where we live. You'll notice that we're in UR downtown, a new presence here. We're delighted. This is our big inaugural event. I'd like to really thank Judy Mejia, she's somewhere, who organized all this. This is the way the world works, isn't it? The person who does all the work is actually still working. I'm showing up. And so we're really grateful to that. I point a couple things out to you. The photographs are here from the time this building was built, which is, like has it, exactly the time of Brown v. Ward. And so these are photographs from the Library of Virginia. My friend Greg Kimball helped with these. And if you had not had a chance to look at them, look around, and it shows you many facets of Richmond at the time that this fundamental law was changed. And we're very grateful to the library. And that embodies the way that we come down here to try to be a partner to as many people as we can. So we want to be at the university, to have a presence in the city, and to use this as a sort of a base of operations. We're doing lots of things. We're still kind of finding out all the things that we can do, but this sets a good example. So thank you for doing this to show that we can do things, that people will come to this if we have it, especially if you have such distinguished speakers. I will just use my time now to welcome our speakers. We have three, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what they all have to say. First is Professor Jonathan Stubbs from UR's very own School of Law, where he teaches human rights and jurisprudence, among other classes. And he edited the book, Brown, the Big Bang and Beyond, the Life Story of Oliver W. Hill, Sr. I see he has a copy, so maybe we'll hear something from him today. And at the other end of the row, the Honorable Henry L. Marsh III, who's currently serving his third term in the Virginia General Assembly as a senator from the 16th District. He was elected to Richmond City Council in 1966 and became Richmond's first black mayor in 1977. And as a member, fifth term. But see, that's good because it gives us a chance to call attention to it. You know, 5 terms. Oh, that's good. Yeah. And as a member of the law firm of Hill, Tucker, and Marsh, he joined the fight against massive resistance that racked our city and the state. Virginia's unfortunate response to the Brown v. Board of Education decision in '54. And our third speaker is Dr. Lauranett Lee, who is curator of African American history at the Virginia Historical Society here in Richmond. Her recent work, which I encourage people to go see, is the African American Image in Virginia, and she's done many past exhibits, including on the Civil Rights Movement. She's authored of the book, Making the American Dream Work, African American History at Hopewell, Virginia, and I'm proud to say that Lauranett and I worked together on a PhD back at my last institution, so it's great to see you. And with no further ado, I turn it over to Professor Stubbs.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I thank God for an opportunity to be here and to share some thoughts with you this afternoon on the eve of the 55th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. To all who are assembled here, it's an honor to be before you and to share this time with you, and I thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to be here and to speak. My job is fairly simple and straightforward, and that is to provoke some thought and hopefully constructive action on the basis of the 55th anniversary of Brown. And particularly what I'd like to do is to offer this particular theme for us to focus on, and that is Brown, social transformation, and the limits of the law. It's Brown, social transformation, and the limits of the law. Now, this is a particular subject that has engaged people for a long period of time. That is, just how much can human law do to affect human behavior? At the very beginning of the modern civil rights era in the United States, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. addressed these issues at a year-end conference in 1962 in Nashville, Tennessee. Dr. King stated this: "Morality cannot be legislated, but behavior can be regulated. Judicial decrees may not change the heart, but they can restrain the heartless. The law cannot make an employer love an employee, but it can prevent him from refusing to hire me because of the color of my skin." Later on, Dr. King says this in the same passage on the limits of the law: "A vigorous enforcement of civil rights laws will bring an end to segregated public facilities, which are barriers to a truly desegregated society. But it cannot bring an end to fears, prejudice, pride, and irrationality, which are the barriers to a truly integrated society. Those dark and demonic responses will be removed only as men are possessed by the invisible inner law, which is etched on their hearts, the conviction that all men are brothers and that love is mankind's most potent weapon for personal and social transformation." So even at the advent of the modern civil rights era, and in the wake of Brown versus Board of Education, it was recognized that while it's a vital part of a program for social transformation, law by itself was not sufficient. There had to be a deeper personal transformation, both individually and collectively, in order for there to be meaningful social change. Agents of the change. Dr. Ayers mentioned Barbara Johns. On April 23, 1951, a 16-year-old student, Prince Edward County, Virginia, led her class, in fact, led most of the students there out on strike at the Robert Russell Moulton High School, an all-black segregated high school in Prince Edward County, Virginia. And the objective that Barbara Johns and her colleagues articulated as they marched out was simple equality under the law. They wanted a school as good as the school which the white kids in Prince Edward County attended. Mr. Hill, Oliver Hill, Judge Spotswood Robinson, Attorney Martin A. Martin, all had a law firm here in Richmond, Virginia. They, like Senator Marsh, were all graduates of the Howard Law School, the premier national institution and the vanguard for the struggle for human rights in this country, and specifically set up in the early part of the 20th century to fight for equality under the law. Barbara Johns called the firm of Hill, Martin, and Robinson. Mr. Hill spoke with her on the phone and told her something she did not want to hear. Go back to class. We already have a case. It's in South Carolina. We only need one case to establish the precedent. That separate but equal is unconstitutional, and we don't need another case. But Barbara Johns dug in her heels. She was determined, she was tenacious, she was eloquent, and she was persuasive. And Mr. Hill did not have the heart, as he said in his autobiography, to refuse her request. So, Mr. Hill and Judge Robinson changed their plans. They got up earlier, they left earlier than they had intended. They were going to Christiansburg because they had a case going on, Corbin versus Pulaski. And under the segregation laws of Virginia, it didn't matter the jurisdictional lines between county and city when it came to busing, to implement and sustain segregation. Black children in Christiansburg and Pulaski County and Bath County were bused across county lines, across township lines, to a central location, a consolidated school. And the plaintiff in this case, Mahatma Corbin, was bused 60 miles each day, one way, to get to a segregated school. And so Mr. Hill and Judge Robinson were on their way to talk with the parents of Mr. Corbin. They stopped in Prince Edward County. And they met with the parents of Barbara Johns and her colleagues at the Church of Reverend Francis Griffin, another strong advocate for human rights here in Virginia. And they talked with the parents and with the kids. And based on that conversation, one of the parents says, this has community-wide implications. We should have a community meeting. So Mr. Hill and Judge Robinson said, all right, we'll meet again. On the way back from Christiansburg, we'll stop here. So they met one Friday night, well into late at night, several hours of discussion. And finally it was decided by a community vote, yes, we as a community are going to go forward and challenge segregation. And so that's part of the impetus for Brown versus Board of Education, because the Prince Edward case was consolidated into the other cases which led to Brown. So there was a community-based movement for social transformation. It was not an individual thing, but the NAACP had been working for years, attempting to set the framework and the foundation through public education and litigation to transform American society, to make this nation live up to its ideals of liberty and equality. And so Brown came. In the aftermath of Brown, there are lots of people who were perfectly happy with the way things were. They did not want social transformation. They preferred the status quo. And they fought vigorously to maintain the status quo. United States Senator Harry Flood Byrd Sr. organized massive resistance here in Richmond, Virginia, across Virginia, and across the South. The Richmond Times-Dispatch, under another name, but the very brilliant young columnists published inflammatory editorials supporting the segregationist policies of so-called massive resistance. And as a result, and part of that, the State General Assembly passed legislation over the objection of Senator Marsh, who was then the president of the Students of Virginia Union, and also over the objection of Mr. Oliver Hill, who came and addressed the General Assembly. Statutes which, among other things, required school districts to shut down if there was desegregation, which provided tuition vouchers, scholarships to maintain segregation, which provided for busing across county and district lines to maintain segregation, to do whatever was necessary under the law to maintain segregation, notwithstanding what the Supreme Court of the United States has said. A law alum of the University of Richmond, Judge Robert Marriage, was appointed in 1967 to the United States District Court here in Richmond. And Judge Marriage, in the midst of the ongoing struggle to desegregate, now 13 years after Brown versus Board of Education, and in places like my home county in Tidewater, Virginia, where I was still attending an all-black school 13 years after Brown versus Board of Education. Judge Marriage had the Richmond part of the ongoing litigation, and Judge Marriage wrote an opinion. I commend it to your late night reading or early morning reading. 200 pages, roughly, in which Judge Marriage analyzed the activities of the school board, of state officials, both in education and in housing, to maintain segregated practices in Richmond, in Chesterfield, and Henrico. And Judge Marriage decided that using his jurisdiction as a federal district judge, the best way, 13 years, well in this case, this opinion was published in 1972, so we're talking almost 20 years after Brown versus Board of Education, that the best way to achieve the goal of equal educational opportunity under the Constitution was to consolidate 3 school systems: Richmond, Chesterfield, and Henrico, into one school system. Judge Marriage issued the order. One of his homes was burned down. His dog was killed. Story is told of a sympathizer of massive resistance, white supremacy, showed up at the federal courts building looking for that SOB marriage and bumped into marriage, not knowing that this was marriage, and asked, "Where is the judge's chambers?" And Judge Marriage pointed down the hall and to the U.S. Marshal's office. This was part of the reaction to Brown versus Board of Education. And we know that Judge Marriage's ruling was overturned by the Fourth Circuit. It was appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. This court was split 4-4. Justice Powell recused himself, so the ruling of the Fourth Circuit was upheld, overturning Marriage's consolidation order. The next term, the United States Supreme Court, in a case called Milliken versus Bradley, had another metropolitan-wide remedy for segregation in Detroit. The court, by a 5-4 vote, this time Powell joining the majority, again overturned the metropolitan-wide remedy, saying that the remedy must be limited to the geographical area of the particular wrong. Another way of stating that is that the constitutional rights of these minority school children ended at the county line. And any remedy would have to be fashioned within the contours of those geographical areas. That's basically where we are today. We still are operating under the rubric of cases like Milliken versus Bradley, which limit the remedies that children whose constitutional rights have been violated are able to obtain through the justice system. One might say, as Mr. Hill said with Plessy versus Ferguson, that's just plain wrong. But it shows an example of the limits of law for societal transformation. That is, in order for society to be transformed at a deep level, people's hearts have to be won over as well as their minds. And unless and until we're able, perhaps in an interdisciplinary way, to address that, so that people see that it's in our interest as a nation to have every American citizen with an equal educational opportunity to reach his or her maximum potential, irrespective of some fluke of history, whether or not they're born in Henrico County, where there, in their school system, all of the kids in the middle schools and high schools have laptop computers and are able to access, keep up with the latest information on the web, or if they're born in the city of Richmond. And there, a fairly recent study by a high school senior demonstrated that at Armstrong High School, the teachers there had to request a day in advance to use the 26 computers in the school for 600 students. So societal transformation must take place at a deep level. Now, our time is short, and I want to leave room for questions and discussion, and also to set a good example for my colleagues. And so I'll simply close with another quote from Dr. King from his last address to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1968. And the basic theme that Dr. King brings forth is a fairly simple one. And that is that in order for us to achieve this deep societal transformation, he said to the people at the conference, what I'm saying today is that we must go from this conference and say, America, you must be born again. And that's a deep transformation. A rebirth of freedom and a commitment to equality and liberty for everybody, regardless of color or class or nationality or sex, sexual orientation. We're all in it together, and we're all going to, as Benjamin Franklin was wont to say, we're all going to hang together or hang separate.
Good afternoon. First, I want to officially welcome Dr. Ayers to downtown Richmond. Your presence here and this facility here is a part of this transformation that Jonathan was talking about. If we're going to complete this war that's going on to bring about true equality, all of us have to be involved in having this campus downtown is a way of getting the university even more involved than it already is. And I must say, your law school has played a leading role in assisting in the transformation of programs where some of us have appeared. I have Professor Stubbs to keep you fired up. And there's much more to be done. I have good news. I'm not going to read it. Really, I don't need it. I lived through all of this. And I came along sort of after Brown. But really, I started before Brown. I started off as a young student at age 5.5 in Lauranett County. My father had sent his children to live with relatives until we got old enough to be reunited with him. And me and two siblings went to Lauranett County, and we had to walk from Rescue almost to Smithfield, about 5 miles each day to school. We left before daybreak. We got back home, it was dark. And 82 pupils went to a one-room school, hot by the stove. And one teacher commuted over from Newport News on Monday morning, and she commuted back Friday afternoon. And that was my first experience. Tucker said that my partner, Tucker said, I found out about segregation when I was born. And that was true of everyone during that time. I didn't realize that there was any difference at that time. I thought everyone went to school that way. And it wasn't until much later I saw that school buses riding past me with white children going into Smithfield. And I asked questions. I said, where are those children going? They have a training school. They're going to a training school. It wasn't really until I got to Richmond, in 5th grade, that I realized that I could have a single teacher for a single grade. In fact, there were 3 sections to the 5th grade. So that was a unique, eye-opening experience. But 82 of us went to school that way. The one teacher did a tremendous job. She organized us so that 5th graders could be talking to the 2nd graders, and the 6th graders could be talking to the 3rd graders. She kept us occupied, which she could keep us in the classroom. We went out to play ball when we could, no excuses. But she taught us some things. She told us about Abraham Lincoln, and I grew up thinking that Abraham Lincoln was a hero. I didn't find out until I got to the General Assembly when I tried to get a resolution for Virginia to participate in the celebration. That Abraham Lincoln is not a hero. Our revolution was ceremoniously killed by the John Committee. And due to some creativity of my commission, I'm chairman of the King Commission. We appointed Abraham Lincoln subcommittee, and now we're celebrating the sesquicentennial of Lincoln's birth without the restrictions of those who don't agree with us. So, and I'm going to talk about the human side of this struggle, because you can read about the cases, I haven't been able, but you probably read about it. But you don't know about the band of heroes that got us where we are today. And I think that's a story that should be told, because everyone can be a hero, as Dr. King said. Everyone can be great because everyone can serve. And when I saw Dr. Ayers here, I realized that when I was there in Richmond, some of the alumni came to me and said, we need a football stadium so we can upgrade our football program. I said, what do you want me to do? Let us have a city stadium. We'll maintain it. We can upgrade our program. We really didn't need it as a city, so I said, okay. And I donated the university, the city donated the university for $1 and upkeep. Later on, both of my daughters graduated, got a good education from the University of Richmond, which you probably wouldn't have gotten. I couldn't afford to send them.
Yes, you could.
You know, it shows how this is all related. When I came to Richmond, I found out a whole lot of things. And I went to high school and I saw Mr. Hill and Spot Robinson arguing a case in federal court. And I was inspired as a high school student. That's what I want to do when I grow up. And later on, as Jonathan mentioned, as president of student government, I went over to the union, went over to the state capitol to protest using public funds for private schools. To make any sense. And that's where I met Mr. Hill. And he made a fiery speech, and I made a so-so speech. And he came up and said, boy, that was a good speech. And I let him call me boy in those days. I would let everybody do that. He said, what you going to do when you grow up? I said, I'm going to be a lawyer. Like you. He shook my hand and said, good, you can come join my firm. And I was a college student. Hadn't even gotten to law school. And I had a chance to be a partner, an associate of the man I saw arguing the case 15 years earlier. It's amazing. And that shows how great Mr. Hill was, how much genius he had to recognize something that I didn't even know. But I kept in touch with him later on. I joined the firm. But this thing had a whole lot of heroes. Jonathan mentioned L. Francis Griffin. When he encouraged the students and supported the students, some of the deacons and folks in his church were so angry, they threatened to kick him out of the church. And he made a speech that should be preserved. And he said, if anybody who would not support these children is less than a man. And when he finished speaking, no one opposed him. He kept his position because he was so wise. But that was heroic. And those students and the people in the community looked to Robert Griffin. And his statue is statue of Captain Grant. I said, all of this is related. There are a whole lot of heroes. All those teachers who did their best in this segregation, all the parents who were sacrificed, and all those school cases that we talked about. A lot of parents lost their jobs because their kids were part of the plaintiffs in the school cases. Some of the NAACP leaders around the state who participated, they lost their jobs. And those people were determined to be free. They took that risk. They're heroes. Some of the children who were the first ones integrated into these schools were spat on, cursed at, accused of a lot of things. And not everyone did that. They were well received by some. But those who suffered were heroes. And the white citizens of that time, a lot of those citizens were heroes. They didn't follow James J. Kilpatrick. They stood up for black folk. And what did the General Assembly do? They appointed a committee of the legislature, misnamed the Committee on the Offenses Against the Administration of Justice. That was a misnomer. But that committee hauled in these white people from around the state and accused them and charged them with a lot of offenses and asked them questions on oath. And Cyril Patton Boyle was strong. Robert Francis Teeter of Lynchburg, priest, he was strong. there were people all over the state, and some African Americans too. And I was fortunate to be one of the lawyers defending those people before that committee in the General Assembly. And some of the law firms that represented the state were prosecuting those people. And those were the same law firms I sued later in Title VII cases to get employment opportunity. So the state was sort of lined up, and it was interesting. James J. Kilpatrick. I'll turn this over to you. And to show you, James J. Kilpatrick made a fortune and fame defending interposition and segregation. Later on, spoke to the National League of Cities on the Speaker's circuit. He got good money for that. And I was on the board of directors of the National League of Cities, and I went up to him. He didn't see me. And when he saw me, that I was in the audience, he almost fainted. Because he gave his side of what had gone on. And he knew I knew the real story. But there were a lot of people who really made this happen. The parents of the children, and others, the civil rights leaders. And if you read the history of the struggle in Virginia during that time, you wonder what would have happened to the country had it not been for the NAACP lawyers, the NAACP chapters, and the parents who stood up for equality. And lawyers like Esther Tucker and Reuben Lawson of Roanoke, and all over the state, those lawyers fought along with the legal defense fund attorneys to try to stop what was going on. They resisted. And there's a funny thing about resistance. When you have people determined to be free, resistance creates a counter-resistance. So in each of those communities where African Americans were challenging segregation, there existed over the years a band of African Americans united to fight against inequality. And each of those places, a few years later, citizens were able to elect an African American mayor. In Newport News, Virginia, Charlottesville, Virginia, in Roanoke, in Lynchburg, Danville, where they had the tremendous demonstrations. And we had more African American mayors in Richmond. We had more African American mayors in Virginia, or cities, than any other.
Virginia.
Norfolk, Virginia.
Please don't forget that.
There are a lot of others than any other state in the Union. And my theory is that had it not been for the resistance to Brown by the political leaders, we wouldn't have had a counter-resistance. We wouldn't have had the political revolution that we had. Mr. Hill recognized the limitations of the courts. And in 1948, he ran for office. He was successfully elected to city council. And that impressed me because when I got frustrated in 1966 with how slow the courts were going, I ran for city council. Intuitively recognized what Mr. Hill had done. And I realized that the Supreme Court was ducking and evading, and people were not being mobilized. But on city council, I represented people in zoning matters, and I saw the power council had. We could bring about change. I didn't want to run myself, but I couldn't get anybody else to run, so then I was approaching. So I said, I'll run for 2 years. That'll give me a chance to find someone else. That 2 years turned into 25 years. And the same thing about the General Assembly. Governor Wilder asked me to come over to the General Assembly. He said, we need you over here. I said, well, I haven't finished what I'm doing in Richmond. He said, you'll never finish that. He said, but you're working 52 weeks a year. Down there, you can work 6 or 8 weeks, and then you can make a living as a lawyer. So I was persuaded to run. And I said, I'd get into the General Assembly for a while, and then I'll go back and practice law full time. Well, that's turned into almost 20 years now. But there's a problem with not having enough people to really get out in front on this thing. And one of the advantages in what you're doing is creating a body of people that can help in the struggle. Mr. Tucker, my partner who really was my mentor, looked at this as a war. We are fighting a war for equality. And we have to fight it on every front, fight it with all our vigor. And he says that I can't breathe without thinking about the fight for freedom. And that's the desire that we have to infuse in a lot of people today, white and black, if we're going to achieve equality. The 55th anniversary is a significant opportunity for us to focus on what the struggle is all about. And how we do that, we have participated in commission. We're very fortunate in having an outstanding staff, and we're going to try to help enlighten people. One of the things that I want to focus on before I stop is the way Virginia approached the celebration of the Confederacy as opposed to the celebration of Lincoln's birthday. They appropriated millions of dollars to celebrate the Confederacy, and not a dime to recognize Lincoln. The excuse they gave was, well, there's a national commission. I said, well, there's a national commission, but other states who Lincoln didn't identify with having their own celebration. Why can't we have it too? Lincoln identified with Virginia as his home. His mother was here. They said, no, it's a waste of money. Then they appropriate $2.5 million for the Confederacy in tight times. And basically said, you get as much more as you need. So we still have a hangover, a serious hangover of the struggle that we have been engaged in. And we want to invite everyone to help us apply some Tylenol, extra strength, something to eliminate this hangover. This is a war that all of us should be involved in. Because the person who has the answer, has a cure for cancer, could be in one of those housing projects and not even get a good opportunity to develop that cure. So we are all in this together. And the University of Richmond has made a lot of progress over the years. And no reflection of youth out there, but when they first invited me to speak on the campus, every time I approached a bunch of students, it was just a dog, they ran the other way. And finally I saw about 10 football players, big guys. They said, what are you on? I said, I'm trying to find the board of trustees. He said, what's right over here? So when I spoke to the board of trustees, I told them, I said, we have a problem up here. These students don't seem to want to show me where your office is. They don't seem to know me. They don't seem to like me. I said, I'm not telling you as a mayor, but there's something wrong with me, I guess. And they got the hint, and they started doing some things. But that's the mentality we have. And there are some who are determined to correct this hangover. We invite your help. I see some in the room we are dedicated to that. Bill, Lauranett, and others. We want to help us get rid of this hangover. Thank you.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. These are the words from the National Negro Anthem that were written by James Weldon Johnson. It was a song that was sung in the segregated black schools. Children grew up learning it. It was sung in the churches. And it was a song that was near and is still near and dear to many people. We don't hear it as much now. You will hear it in the black churches in February. But it's a song that I often quote because it means a great deal to me. I am a Virginian. I study Southern history, and Virginia in particular is very close to my heart. I've been very fortunate to study with Ed Ayers, who specializes in Southern history, and to know people who have made their life careers studying Southern history. We just lost John Hope Franklin on March 25th, who made his career studying African American and Southern history. Edgar Toppin as well. But one of the things I wanted to focus on today is those people, those young people who walked the line during that war. And the civil rights movement is very much a war, as Senator Marsh just said. Those young people never really got the recognition that they deserve. Thurgood Marshall, the late Supreme Court Justice, said that we can legislate and knock down doors, knock down walls and open doors, but it takes the attitudes of people to really change things. And it's those attitudes that really make the difference. And those attitudes came from all people, not only blacks, but whites as well. Not only males, but females as well. And so today what I'd like to do is just to show you some of the images that I've come across in my study. In 2004, at the Virginia Historical Society, we installed an exhibit called The Civil Rights Movement in Virginia. And it was well received and traveled throughout the state. And I was very fortunate to go into the archives of many of our repositories here and find images that people had not seen before. Here you're looking at an image of Drew Gilbert. Drew Gilbert House. Currently the president of Harvard University, was raised in Clark County. At the age of 9, she wrote to President Dwight Eisenhower, asking why is it that those children who were involved in Little Rock 9 were not allowed to go into the school? What made them any different from her? She was one of those people that firmly believed that everyone was entitled to an equal education. And she has said that it is that experience and many like those that informed her and encouraged her to go into the study of Southern history. Here you're looking at young girls with their mothers going into the Norfolk school system. And it's important to me that I remember those people's names because they're not just those little girls. They are Mary Rose Foxworth, a first grader, and Daphne Permenter, a second grader, going into Suburban Park School in Norfolk. Their parents had been told that they should not let their children go into the schools, but here you see them going, and their grandmother is following them. We're looking at 1959, September 8th. Here we're looking at one of the students, Betty Jean Reed, January 2nd, 1959, going into Granby High School. She was one of those who later talked about her experiences and the taunts and the jeers that she had to endure on a daily basis just to get an education. Lewis Cousins enrolled in Norfolk, and this photographer has captured a pensive moment as Cousins awaits his class assignments. And when we talk about desegregation, big word, but what does it mean? It means being alone and in a class where no one else is talking to you. It means being on the playground and no one else playing with you. Getting on the bus and not sure whether you'll get a seat or not. Here we see an image of Dr. Martin Luther King in Farmville, Virginia. And this particular image is not one that people often see of him when he is bending down to talk with children and offer encouragement and hope. And this comes from the collection at Virginia Union University. He said, "Our freedom was not won a century ago. It is not won today, but some small part of it is in our hands. And we are marching no longer by ones or twos, but in legions of thousands, convinced now it cannot be denied by any human force." And we have students in Farmville who walked the lines daily, asking, why is it they are denied an education? By 1963, Warren Wilkins of the NAACP concluded Virginia has the largest and most successful token integration program in the country. Even a year later, in 1964, only 5% of black students attended integrated schools. This was taken by photographer Jim Berry, who was with the Richmond Times-Dispatch. And later you see students, white students, protesting busing. And we find that many of these students were coming not from only Richmond, but Chesterfield and Henrico as well, particularly when Judge Marriage legislated that the school systems would be consolidated. And here we have an image of the late Judge Marriage with students after integration had occurred. The percentage of white students in Richmond city schools declined from 45 to 21% between 1960 and 1975. White flight prevented Richmond schools from becoming truly integrated. After a voter referendum to combine the suburban school districts of Chesterfield and Henrico counties with the city of Richmond failed, Federal District Judge Robert Marriage ordered the consolidation of the 3 school districts by judicial action on January 10, 1970. And here we have Taylor Holton, who's striding into John Kennedy High School with her father, then Governor A. Linwood Holton, in the fall of 1970. Governor Holton, a progressive, was the first Republican governor of Virginia in the 20th century. He participated in Richmond's court-ordered busing plan. Although by precedent, Taylor's parents could have placed her in one of the still mainly white suburban county schools. This photograph, which ran in the New York Times, serves as a counterpoint to deep South images of resistance. Here you're looking at 2 white girls with a black girl, ironically, at Virginia Union University. One would have thought that they would be in a white school. But one of the things we come to realize is that with the changes, white females were able to benefit from many of those changes that had been designated for black students. Although President Nixon had attempted to block desegregation efforts, he failed to do so. Ironically, during his first term, more schools were desegregated than in all the more liberal Kennedy-Johnson years combined. The year 1970 marks the first time a greater percentage of Southern schools were desegregated than Northern schools. And finally, the Civil Rights Memorial at the State Capitol, which was unveiled on June 21st, 2008. Dedication celebration commemorated the efforts of students not only in Farmville, but the civil rights activists across the Commonwealth of Virginia who participated in the struggle to gain equal education rights. We are very fortunate to live in a time when we can see these changes take place. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers and mothers sighed. Thank you.